Swing the head towards me a little. Alright, fishing tip. Right now we're late October on the Salmon River, and we're right in the middle of an egg bite for steelhead fishing. So the tip of the day is going to be fishing egg flies. I'm going to show a couple different techniques, including when I just kind of like tight line work with a full dry line, and also with indicators. So I'm going to go over both. And we're on a nice little cut here. You can see right behind me where the water's kind of trenched. One is I'm picking the spot to fish because there's gravel above us where there's been spawning activity from the salmon. There's a corridor, there's a little bit of break in the surface where the fish have cover. And then there's also a little bit of soft water from the rest. But more importantly, that in this situation and with this gravel bottom of this run, it's saturated with eggs. So when these steelhead come in, as much as we love to swing for them and play, this is a great time to start playing with a bunch of our favorite flies and throw all the goofy stuff and the great intruders and experiment with the wet flies. Sometimes we got to match to hatch, and very often, especially at this time of the year when there's been a lot of spawning going on in an area, these fish come in and they get keyed in on eggs. And I've never had any luck telling the fish what to eat, so in this case we just kind of got to match the hatch, and the hatch is eggs, and do an egg drift. Quite often I've tried to swing flies to these fish and they just don't move. So then we put on an egg pattern and we'll have a great day. So in this case I'm going to talk about how we deal with the eggs, and I'm going to start out with the rod I'm using. In this case I have an 11-foot switch rod, which we use most of the time, set up with a Skagit line, and then I have a floating tip on. Remember, with your Skagits you always want to run a tip, so I put a floating tip on and a 10-foot leader, just like you would be doing if you're fishing with like a 10-foot 7-weight and doing this type of fishing. We're going to run a floating system with a 10-foot leader, and then also I have an egg fly on, which I'll give you a close-up in a bit. And what I've done is about 36 inches of tippet. This is probably about 36, give or take. And I'm in this particular this particular leader, I happen to have a small swivel on to conserve my wearpiece. And what we'll do with what I call the dry line fishing is, and it works great in pocket water and tight spots, is now I'm going to add split shot to get the fly down, but I don't want to get carried away. You want just enough to maintain steady contact, but you don't want to drag bottom. Remember, we're drifting, so that egg fly's kind of got to roll along the bottom at current speed. One of the mistakes everybody does is they put on way too big a shot and way too many, and the fly ends up just kind of unnaturally dragging along the bottom. You just want it just kind of tickling along the bottom. But you got to get your egg fly too, because the fish is used to going to the bottom picking the fly out. So you're going to be a constant, as you play around here, adjustment of weight. And you notice I just kind of go into my pocket, and I think right now I got a whole loose load of split shot in here. And because you're going to be, as you're working through the run in the pool, remember the weight you put on is not stagnant. Once you get dialed in and you get your weight adjustment, all it is a point of reference, because when you start fishing a little deeper you may have to add. When you fish a little shallower, you got to retract. You move up or move down, the current speed, the depth, everything changes, and so will your weight adjustment change. So that's why I like using a few small shot and constantly adjusting. So this is the setup. Now what we're going to do is we're going to kind of move the camera a little bit and get a little bit more out in the water, and then we can show the presentations that I'm using. Alright, now we're in the water, we got the camera repositioned, and I'm going to kind of do it. In this case we're going to do kind of like a high stick presentation. What I do is I start out is, what you don't want to do is cast way upstream and then coming down. Break the water down into small manageable bites. So in this case I'm going to be with the river coming from my right to my left. I'm going to actually make my cast about 2 o'clock upstream. And I'm going to just raise the rod tip up. I'm going to just work with the leader. And then as it gets below me, I'll drop the rod, extend the drift, So swing a little bit, set it up, come up, and just repeat the cast. And at this point, you got a really precise drift going on, and you can just be very detailed about where that fly goes. You can kind of have a little bit of contact in the bottom. Sometimes you might feel a little dip or a little drop off in there, or a little ledge, and you can then just work that fly along those contours. The other thing is, by doing this, you know if you're working inshore, out, you can feel around. You go, wait a minute, there seems to be the deepest part, the trench of the run. You can run down through the trench, because a lot of times what happens is those eggs get funneled down into the trench. So even though you might have fish on either side of it, your eaters are going to be in that trench. So the nice thing about this way is it helps you find that trench. And this works really good on gravelly bottoms, more consistent runs where you don't have a lot of substructure. George, why don't you swing the camera around and follow the track of the fly in the cast. So you can see as I'm getting below, I'm dropping the rod tip, and everything's getting kind of extended. Yeah, it's swinging a little bit. Sometimes you get on swing, but with this swing just sets up, then I'll just kind of come back up to 1 o'clock, and then I just raise the rod tip up through the drift. Right in front of me, I got my rod at the height. As it goes below me again, I just kind of drop the rod down. So basically, a lot of your mending is with the rod tip. Either I'm raising it or I'm lowering it. Once again, when I go up, rod's low, I just lift the fly line off the water, and then I just walk it down. As it gets below me, I can just... And what I'm doing is I'm actually kind of doing both by feel, because this is a very light, stiff rod, and I can do them feel. I'm also watching the tip of the fly line. So if the fly line's doing that, it's telling me, those little twitches are telling me that I'm finding fish. Or excuse me, I'm finding bottom. When I find a fish, it'll just go and you'll know it. There's enough little tension on the drift when the fish grabs. Things will go tight very quickly, and the fish will react. You'll feel the shake, you'll see it in your line, and you can set the hook. Or you get on bottom. There we go. One last time. You can see I'm just, as it comes by me, I'm raising the tip, coming down, dropping the rod tip, following it through. The swing part is just more or less just setting it up and repeat. All right, let's... Technique. All right, I just went through and explained the first technique where we kind of high stick, I call high stick nymphing or high stick egg fishing. Now I'm going to show you what I do when I break out of, you hear us jokingly in some of our videos, we refer to them as drift management devices. Some people call them bobbers, strike indicators. I like drift management devices, but anyways, I digress. But it's a useful technique. Works very good in snaggy bottoms. So if you have a lot of hang-ups, if you have a lot of subsurface structure to the run or the pool, or even sometimes in pockets where you got to drive a fly down and mend it. There's a lot of, especially on the Salmon River in certain sections, there's just a lot of big fly-eating boulders. And often working with these things work really good. If you're fishing in a really deep trench and you got to be really precise about dropping it down, these work great. I often break them out in deeper runs. In this case, we took a cue from the float fisherman. This is a little raven float. This will be the one I'll be showing, and I'll show you how I set it up. Other options, this is one of George's favorite. These are airlocks, little screws. These are really convenient. Nice thing about the airlock and these floats, they're really gentle on your leaders. They don't chew them up or bend them up. We're all familiar with the thingamabobbers. They're very handy and convenient. They're just a little rough on your leaders. So in this case, the airlocks and the thingamabobbers are pretty self-explanatory. What we do, the people that fish with us often will see, is on our standard leader, I don't change nothing, but in this case, I just got a couple tubes strung onto the leader. Now what's nice about this is if I don't want a float on there or any strike indicator, these things just stay on. Since I tie my own leaders, there's knots, I just shove it up to the top, get it above a knot. And then, alright, I want to float, and I would need to use a strike indicator. I just slide them on and just get them strung on. This tubing's pretty stiff. The stiffer tubing works way better than the softer stuff. You just right on here, and what's interesting is they look really wind resistant, but these things actually cast really well and turn over well. And the other thing is you can slide them up and down the leader. They're really easy and convenient to adjust, because just like the weight and the shot you're fishing, your drop underneath your strike indicator is just as important. So you're constantly adjusting, maybe 6 inches this way, up or down. And 6 inches can be a big difference in struggling with the bottom or not catching fish and just getting the drift right. A quick tip with the weight, if you happen to use split shot, obviously with this rig and even with the indicator, when you first step in the water, take extra caution and time to make sure that where you're standing, where you're starting your drift, you get everything set as perfect as you can. Because once you get that one drift, that one line that you're fishing set perfect, you now have a point of reference to adjust for the rest of the run and the pool as you fish through it. So as you work your way through it, you got to adjust, but you've got a good point of reference to start with. So it's always a good idea when you first start to make sure that you get everything set right, so you're very happy with it, because as you work through the run, you can make those adjustments, those fine adjustments as you work through the run, and you can keep everything fishing correct. Alright, now I'm going to go over how I work with the strike indicators, the drift management devices. And it's pretty much similar to what we're doing. A couple of things you can get away with. One is you can cast a little bit further upstream and you won't have the problem. But what's more important is when you mend, you can work a longer little drift. And the nice thing about it is when you can mend up to these larger floats, and you're not going to pull your fly off drift. So in this case, I mend up hard, and the same deal, I can just, and if I see the float sink a little bit, it's okay. It's just when it goes 2 foot to the left sharply and I got to fish. The other thing is if you're not sure that if you have an eat, and she sinks like that, just give it a little bump like that. If there's a fish on the end of it, you'll know. That little bump would be all you need. Alright, once again, we're just kind of doing the same track, dropping it, and what is nice about this is I'll mend to the indicator quite a bit more on this side. You get up a little bit, you can also cast which are a little deeper water, and since I'm working a little further away from me, I'll mend up to the float. Yeah, I'm bouncing the float a little bit, but it doesn't matter. Because the float's heavy enough, a couple inches of bounce on the float, you're not going to affect the track of the fly at all. We're in a pretty heavy spot here, so I'm fishing a little bit more weight than normal. The water's a little high. Now if this float sinks a little bit, and you think you have a fish, just give it like a little 6 or 8 inch jig on the bobber, or the float. What that'll do is there's a fish on it, that fish will react right to it, then you can just continue to set the hook. If there's no fish there, the chances are it's starting to get hung on the bottom, and it just kind of gets the fly back moving again. So it's kind of like a little skip. And the nice thing about this is you can see I can follow the bubble lines, the actual drift line. We can stay more in the slots, more in the main, in the slot of the run. We can keep it in a certain part of the pool. In this case here, if we find that the fish are really oriented in the faster, deeper part, we can keep it flying with an indicator in the deeper, faster part better. If the fish are up at the rock, a little upstream, it just comes off. That's another nice thing about running the indicators, is very often you're not getting driven into the rocks as bad. You can keep out the snaggy stuff. But pretty much the same presentation as we use when we're with the indicators as with and out, but except for the nice thing about the indicators is we can keep the fly right on track, fish a certain current depth or certain, like the inside saltwater if we want, or we can keep it right in the trench a lot more efficiently. That's where the old term drift management device comes to, is you can see I can keep it right into the main current and down the main slot a lot longer and a lot easier working with the float than I can without it. And I can cover a little bit more water, a little bit more efficiently with a lot less hang-ups. Alright, just swinging over towards me. Alright, I hope this egg fishing tip works for you. Okay, that pretty much finishes up our tip on fishing egg flies or the egg drift or egg patterns, however you want to describe it. But hopefully you'll find this tip helpful, and obviously we'll have more tips coming up in the future. So once again, as I always keep begging, hit that subscribe button and of course that little bell icon. That way you'll notify when we get more videos up, because there's more coming, folks. Lots more fishing videos and fishing tips. See you on the water. Good fishing. This is Jay at JPEG Guides and Lost River Fishing. We are a year-round fly fishing catch and release guide service. We fish the Lake Ontario tributaries, and then during the spring and the summer we also fish the inland trout streams, classic dry fly fishing. During the heat of the summer we will do the warm water fishing for bass and pike. If you're interested in any of our outings or have any questions, please feel free to email us at fish@lostriversfishing.com. Hope to hear from you, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact us.